So Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks are looking to keep their Pac-12 championship hopes alive, traveling to Utah this weekend. Utah, of course, they've won their last 18 games at home. Their last loss being against USC in 2020 with no fans in attendance. So if you take that away, they've won their last 27 games at home. A lot's being made about that stat. But Drew, something I feel that's not being talked about as much. Dan Lanning in his second year. This is a tough team. This defense is tough with a massive improvement from last year. And, we've seen it with Brett Venables at Oklahoma, Kirby Smart at Georgia. These defensive coaches, they come in and they can turn it around quick. Oregon's offense has been good, but with Dan Lanning now, their defense is elite as well.
Yeah, Oregon's a really complete team all around when you look at it. Of course, everyone knows what Oregon can do offensively with Bo Nix and their staple of running backs who are all averaging over 7 yards per carry. And then with Bo Nix throwing for over 2,000 yards already at this point in the season. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Oregon's defense. They're very underrated, I think. And when you look at the Pac-12 and you look at the offenses in the Pac-12, having a good defense is a tremendous tool and a tremendous key to success if you want to be successful in this conference, because you got to find a way to stop some of these offenses. Now, when you play a Washington or you play a USC, you're not going to fully shut down those offenses, but you got to find a way to at least slow them down. And Oregon definitely has a defense that's capable of doing so. And Dan Lanning's really doing some good things at Oregon, and I expect him to continue to build on this defense for, year by year. So I mentioned the offenses of Washington and USC and how good they are. Fortunately for Oregon, they're not playing an offense like that this week. They're playing a Utah offense that's really struggled this year. Cam Rising is officially out for the season. We won't be seeing him. So Utah is going to be rolling with Bryson Barnes and a couple of running backs. Jaquindon Jackson, 6'2", 230. He's an absolute hoss and a really good running back. But Utah is going to need a lot more from their quarterback play, I think, if they want to beat this Oregon team.
Yeah, Utah, they were struggling without the quarterback play. They found their guy in the pig farmer. That's who they're going to be rolling with. They've been putting quarterbacks at running back, safeties at running back. Sione Vaki, he's a good explosive player on both sides of the ball. He's been making plays. And, since they've kind of figured things out the last 2 weeks, they have been putting a hurt on teams with the ground attack. With that being said, though, whenever they've played elite teams, they have given up around 6 yards per carry on the rush. Particularly to USC last week, 6.9 yards per carry given up by this Utah front seven. Which this Utah front seven is star-studded. Don't get me wrong. Jonah Ellis, the number one guy out of that group, and, the D-line in total has only given up 78 yards on the ground, on average throughout the games. But like I was mentioning, against better competition, they haven't been able to keep that success up, in stopping the run. And whenever you're talking about this Oregon offense, PFF has this O-line ranked number 1 rushing O-line in the country. Number 2 passing O-line in the country. This is an elite O-line, and, Oregon has a reputation of having star-studded O-line, but they got some guys now that have the same ceiling as Penei Sewell, when he was at Oregon. So this Oregon O-line is probably the best it's been in recent history. And whenever you're talking about stopping this run, which is really what you're going to have to do to get Oregon, uncomfortable to produce stops, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, and when you look at just the average total yards per game from these two teams, Oregon's at 553. Utah's at 345. That's a pretty big difference right there. And another difference I want to talk about is the third down conversion percentage. Oregon is currently 5th with a 53% conversion percentage. Utah is all the way at the bottom at about 96th. Third down's the money down in this game. And when you look at this game and you try to decide which team you're more comfortable with converting on third downs, it's got to be Oregon. And I'm not saying this to put down Utah. I'm not saying that Utah's a bad team. I'm saying they have a struggling offense, and their defense, unfortunately, I think, is going to be exposed a little bit to the point where Utah's offense is going to have to find ways to make plays. And I just don't see that happening. Another thing to keep in mind, too, Utah is coming off a very emotional win against USC. It's very hard to get up after you just had an emotional win and play an opponent that's even better the following week. I think what saves Utah a little bit is that the fact that they are at home, and Aiden, you did mention it, Utah's a really good home team. Oregon's also a really good football team too, and they're not going to be scared in this environment. Oregon's played in some really tough football games this year. They played on the road at Washington, which is probably going to be the rowdiest game the Pac-12 has seen this season. Oregon's not going to be intimidated by this crowd. And Dan Lanning, I think, is a really good motivator. We've all seen clips of him and his speeches. He knows that this is a must-win game, and he's going to get that message conveyed to his players. And I think Oregon's going to come out and play hard. And I just think Oregon's offense is just going to be too much for Utah's offense, and Utah's not going to be able to keep up with them. I know Utah's defense is great statistically, but like you said too, Aiden, every time they play a little bit of competition, they've been exposed a little bit. I expect that to happen in this game. When you look at the line, it's between 6.5, 7, 6 points. You can find all sorts of different lines for this game. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to go 6.5. I think Oregon does cover, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Oregon maybe even win this game by double digits. Again, that's not likely to happen. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Oregon does cover, but it's going to be around 7 to 8. And I just think Oregon's offense is just going to outscore Utah's offense in this game.
Yeah, so the line opened up at Oregon -5.5, and then it jumped all the way up to Oregon -7. So when I was first looking at this game, that kind of made me a little bit apprehensive, especially taking into account that Utah has this impressive home game winning streak with an elite defense. And a lot of the people, the fans are going with Oregon. Kind of made me want to go with Utah at first. I talked a little bit about Utah's defense earlier. They got Jonah Ellis. They got 2 other edge rushers that are dogs. They got a good corner in Vaughn. And, their 2-way player, Sione Baki, is a dog as well. Also, Cole Bishop on the inside. So there's guys on this Utah defense. It's an elite defense. Don't get me wrong. But, as I started to look more into this game, Utah against better rushing teams, they have not been as proficient. And Utah's O-line has been able to bully inferior front sevens. Utah's O-line is good, but I don't think that with the speed that Oregon has at linebacker, with guys like Cody Schrader and the speed that Oregon has with their safeties filling the run, their safeties fill the run aggressively. So I think that it will probably be a close game until the fourth quarter. I think Utah's offense is just, or Oregon's offense rather, is just too high powered. I'm going to take Oregon with the points. I think it'll be the under. I don't think too many points will be scored in this game. Oregon has a good defense. Utah has a good defense, and that's just a couple of stops. I think what's the over-under? Is 49.5?
I got 47.5 on my thing.
Okay.
For Caesar
so,
Sportsbook.
Yeah, so 47.5. Yeah, I like the under in that.
I do too. I really do too. You could expect to see a lot of field goals, honestly, be kicked in this game. And red zone, that's another thing I wanted to mention lastly too. Red zone is going to be very important. If you get in the red zone in this game, you better find a way to score a touchdown. I just think if you just go in the red zone and you stall down, you just have to kick a bunch of field goals. I don't think that does either team any good in this game. But again, when I talked about the third down, when you look at these two teams and you try to decide who's more likely to put it in the end zone, it's got to be Oregon. Again, for another reason, I'm going to pick Oregon to cover the spread. I do like the under in this game too, Aiden. This is going to be a low-scoring game, and I would expect this game to be really low-scoring at halftime. And I just think that Oregon's just going to pull away in the third and fourth quarters. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And be sure to leave down below in the comment section what y'all think is going to happen in this game. And if there's any key points that you think we missed or that you'd want to share, please let us know down below. But that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. We'll see you in the next video.